today's little project is all about this. This is a rocker, normally off, 2-position, momentary on. I'm going to be installing this inside of the back gate of the FJ Cruiser. Let's go ahead and get the back panel off the door. Those folks have never taken the back off. Basically, these little snap-on covers, I'm going to pry from this side here with a non-marring tool. This will pop up and come out. Over here is another one. This will pop up and come out. Under here, there's a little tab. You just pop these out. A little 10mm bolt on the inside. Same thing with this side here. And then, like all the panels on the inside, you just basically grab a hold of part of the door. I'll start it with a non-marring tool, and then this just snaps off. So let's go ahead and get this off, and we'll talk about that a little bit. This is one of the non-marring tools I like. These always come in a set of 4 with different ends on it here. And what's nice is you can actually get in and get something started. Alright, take the bolts out. After popping off these little covers here, you can see that tab. You just apply a little pressure, they pop right out. Take the bolts out, take these off here. And that little non-marring tool is kind of cool. You can use it to take it off without leaving any marks on here. Definitely worth the investment of just a few dollars. Alright, you can see that this works good. Again, you can't hurt the paint as long as you do. Once you get it started, all you have to do is get your hands under here. It sounds horrible, but it's just these little plastic fasteners popping loose. And some of them can fall out, so just make sure you take a look at the back of this panel when you get it out to make sure they're all there, or look on the ground in case one fell out. So let's go ahead and get this off. This little bitty thing here, this is the one we'll be tapping into right here. Okay, after peeling this back, be careful of this black pitchy stuff that they use to kind of hold this up in place. And let's see here. This is the wire bundle here we'll be tapping into. So we have a red, a blue, and a black. And again, that's what we'll be tapping into to get this mod in. We're going to run some wiring. It'll come up in here. I'm going to make a quick disconnect in the middle of it, and so that when I take the door off, I don't have to keep pulling the wires out of the actual switch itself. I can actually disconnect it here, so we'll take a look at that. Alright, so under here, this is the actual key from outside. These are the wires. And we'll just go ahead and tap into this side here, since it's all loose and there's plenty of wire to tap into. I like to have it covered. So let's see if there's a good way to kind of go ahead and tap into this thing here. And try to do the best I can to make it look factory. And then of course you have to blast a little hole through this. I use something like a hot poker to make a nice hole through the plastic, and then that'll come out and be on the standby to plug into the actual switch that I'm going to mount back in this panel here. So let's get to work. Overkill, but at least I do have black, blue, and red. This gauge is a heck of a lot thicker. Of course, it's always better to be too thick than too thin than the wire that's in there. So I'll go ahead and use this, cut them off, and get the fasteners hooked up. Looking at it, I really wanted to solder it in, but there's no way to get some heat shrink, and I'm not a big fan of using electrical tape in a place like that back there, simply because moisture can get into it. It starts to unravel, the heat affects it, and the adhesive on the black electrical tape can start to melt. So I'm really wanting to use heat shrink, so I've got an idea. Let's see what we can come up with on this. Alright, I try to keep my little bins here stocked. I started putting this thing together all the way back in 1982. And these are the ones here I'm going to go ahead and use. These basically crimp onto the wire. And you'll see when I do that, it actually forms a port that you can actually push this into and tap off. And I say the blue's going to have to be the one I use because of the size of the wire I'm using. And I'm going to have to come up with some another way to disconnect it so I don't have to keep pulling these out of the switch. Okay, and when working on anything electrical in the car, this tube of dielectric grease becomes your best friend. It promotes conductivity, and it also keeps out corrosion and adds a little bit of lubricity to whatever it is you're trying to do as far as getting these in and out between the male and the female connectors. Also get yourself a good crimp. I like to use these here because that little crimping portion has a lot of strength and you don't have to worry about getting a bad crimp, and then the wire can pull out. Heat shrink. Oh my god, I just actually replenished my stock the other day. This stuff is so important. After you go ahead and do all this, it's always good to put some heat shrink on to go ahead and clean it up and make it waterproof where the wires go into different connectors. Again, I'll even fill the inside of these connectors here with dielectric grease, and even this little connector down here, that little U portion, that'll have some dielectric grease on it also. And of course, to use a heat shrink, you need yourself a decent heat gun. I think this one here was a whopping, I don't know, maybe $30 on Amazon. I use these so much, I usually wear them out after about 2 or 3 years. But anyway, so let's get this made up, and I'll let you see what the finished product, as far as what I'm trying to do here, is. And then we'll go ahead and get it wired up on the vehicle. We'll get it on here, and we'll take it from there. And not to beat a dead horse, but even before you take that copper wire and stick it in this hole, get some dielectric grease in there also. Again, this will take care of any corrosion. Anytime I take something apart, like I'll do in the back, I'll open up the actual plugs that are back there and throw some of this dielectric grease down into the female portion and put them back together again. That way in the future you don't start having gremlins pop up due to moisture or something like that and giving you a bad connection due to some corrosion. This stuff is just honestly worth its weight in gold. I absolutely love it. I've been using it, oh my god, ever since, let's see here, 1981? So, and it's made by different companies over the years, but CRC seems to be a pretty good company. They're all the same, but I happen to like the CRC brand. It's dielectric grease here. Inside here, before the wires went in, these are all crimped in. And I will go ahead and even seal up that gap in between the wire and the connector itself with some heat shrink. One of the things that to remember whenever you're using heat shrink and connectors like this, where you're going to be using them to slide in, you don't have to really worry about it as far as being a butt connector. But if you have something that has an opening that you're going to be using to slide things in and out of, you got to be careful. This is heat sensitive. This will also shrink. And if it shrinks too much, then you have a heck of a time trying to get the actual male portion into these. So what I like to do is, when I'm heat shrinking, is I'll go ahead and wrap the portion that I want protected with foil. Then I'll heat shrink that down, and this will protect the heat from the end from shrinking that opening. And this is actually a double wall heat shrink. On the inside it has a meltable layer that actually forms a watertight seal as it shrinks down. And as you can see, the actual heat shrink is shrunk to where I want it, and this end here is unaffected. But I will go ahead and fill this up with some dielectric grease for when I make the connections later on. This is going to go into these. It's going to be my main power. Then I'm going to add this into the actual wiring loom. That'll be my quick disconnect for when I pull that panel off. I can just disconnect those, and then when I connect it back out, just match the colors. Give myself plenty of room. And then I'll go ahead and tie wrap this up and try to make it look as good as I can. So let's get the rest of this done and see if I can't show you the finished product as far as the wiring loom goes. Okay, so there is the heat shrink on the wire and the connector. Again, it's double walled. It kind of has a gel. I don't know if you can see it right there on the where the red meets the black. But that melts and bonds and actually gives you a nice waterproof seal inside the heat shrink. And since this is going to be where I plug into these, which is going to be some hot wires in there along with the ground and all that, when you disconnect it, since this is the feed side, you don't want this flopping around as you disconnect it, maybe touching something metal. So on this side here, we're going to be using the female ends. Somewhere in this area right here, and again, when I take the panel off, I can reach in and disconnect these, and if there's any power on any 12 volt on the actual contactors in there, if it rests against the vehicle or touches it, nothing's going to short and blow or fuse. And on the other side that goes into the switch, that can be these, because there won't be any power on them as you disconnect them. So that's the way I'm going to set this up. let's go ahead and get that done. I want to leave this nice and long so that when I pull the panel off and put it back on, I don't have to worry about holding it close, trying to hold it with my knee, and get the wires into the actual switch here. So I'll show you what I mean. It's pretty self-explanatory. So let's get the rest of this set up. Time to take the second half of this and get that one all set up, kind of like this side here. These are pretty close together, so I'm going to use a double wall insulated one for the center, and then I can use just some regular ones for the sides. That way there's no way they can come in contact with one another. The dielectric grease is in these. I just need to crimp it on, do some heat shrink, and then go over to the vehicle and get this installed. Alright, this is the T-style wire taps that tap into the wire without cutting it. There's the female part of the spade hooked up. This eventually is going to be my quick disconnect once I get this all sorted out. And all we need to do now is give it a go and give it a try and see if it works. Alright, so there's, like I said, the center one is insulated, and you get the two bare spades on each side. It's all hooked in there. So this is lock, 1 syllable, unlock is 2 syllables. That's lock, unlock, again and hold it, and the window just popped open. Very nice little mod. Just need to get this mounted and get this tidied up, and I need to take the strain off these little wires using this loom here. So let me get that tidied up, and then I can show you guys how that came out. Been using these for years. This is a tie wrap gun. You can adjust the tension here with this little wheel, and this stretches it and cuts it at the same time, and it cuts it really close to where it actually cuts it flush. That way you don't reach in later on, sharp piece of plastic, and rip your finger open on it. So they're really neat, and they're kind of cool the way they work. One thing nice about the tie wrap gun is you can set the tension as how hard you want it to squeeze the bundle, and when it cuts it, it leaves it perfectly smooth, so there's no way you can rip your fingers open later on. I just need to bond that to this, make sure that the pressure is off these wires here, and run this through the plastic, put the plastic back up, and then work on the switch in the door. Alright, I was able to find this little clip here. Basically, it's goes to some blinds that went on the door, and this clips on the blinds and holds the molding trim piece. Well, it came with an extra piece, so I keep all this stuff. Up here is my miscellaneous leftover parts, and it was in this one here that actually had that piece that went to the blind, which came in handy. That's on there. It's not going anywhere. It kind of keeps these at a pretty good angle, take most of the stress off these wires. They're nice and loose, no stress there. Put the tie wrap down here. This is where it'll enter through the plastic after I put that up. This will be sticking out, my quick disconnects, and then the door. So that's basically the best I could do is tidying it up. Unfortunately, this doesn't look perfect like its factory. It doesn't. You can tell that there's something that I did for aftermarket, but it's not too bad, and at least it's all protected. There won't be any chafing. Nothing can get in there. What I'm going to do real quick is pop these connectors here and get some dielectric grease in there before I put the plastic back up. Alright, a box of these, which hardly cost anything, can be your best friend, especially when working with that plastic and that black tar stuff, because it does get everywhere. You'd be surprised to think, oh, I'll just be careful. Trust me, if you just put these on, get them all messed up, and then toss them, it's so much better than trying to clean this stuff off. And so just like up here, for this motor here, the wire comes out. Like mine down here, the wire will come out, it'll stay like this. So when you pull the panel off, you just disconnect these wires, let them flop down, and then you can do whatever you need to do back here. Alright, looking at the way that this sits in the truck, this is going to be the point where it's the top. Some of the guys put some of the switches in here. My only problem is that window sits against a gasket that somebody can stick a coat hanger in and then reach in and push down on one of these buttons to pop the window, and then they've got free reign to get inside your vehicle and do everything. So I don't really want it to be shown, not to mention I don't want the UVs beating on the switch either. So what I think I'm going to do is mount the switch right there. It could be sitting right there on the vehicle. I think that'll look kind of nice, and at the same time people really won't be able to see it unless they look through those little side windows with a flashlight. Oh, there it is, but they don't even know it's there. So I'm going to mount it right there so it's out of view. Nobody can reach in with a coat hanger and just push down on it and break into my vehicle. So let's get that mounted here and then get wired up and see what I can do about securing the wire so there's nothing being pulled on the switch itself. I'm going to be using a deep stepper bit. I do have a few different types. Don't really need one this big or here, or this one here I used to use for 1/2-inch electrical connectors many years ago. But this one here seems to work out pretty good, and I've already counted it's 1, 2, 3 from the top. So I'll start it at 4 from the top, check the hole, because you can always make it a little bit bigger. If you make the hole too big, then you're kind of SOL. Okay, that's on the back. That's how it looks on the front. And again, from the outside window, nobody will really be able to see that. Lock, 2 syllables, unlock. Alright, let's go ahead and get the wire in. We're pretty much finished off, so here's the product here. We have tie wraps making a nice little wire bundle, and what I did over here is actually drilled out a couple holes in this so I could run a tie wrap to hold this in place. That way there's no force ever being exerted on the connection portions of the actual switch. And that'll give you a chance to pull this away, disconnect this, set this aside. I do have tons of these. You can buy these on Amazon if you just put in automotive fasteners, and every now and then I'll lose these little flat washers, so I just throw in an O-ring. This one here, I made this a long time ago. It's a little harder to disconnect. I might replace that one with one of these because I do have, God forbid, tons of them up in here, but it just gives me a different type of fastening when I close this. So let me get this all together, show you guys the finished product. Alright, when you put these in, these little rubber sleeves here, it's good to take a screwdriver after you have it in and push these down, otherwise they're up and they'll stay in that position. Again, it doesn't look very good, plus it's kind of defeating the purpose of what they're doing. So I always take this little screwdriver and just make sure the little flaps are down. Alright, there's the door, all back together. There's the switch there. So 1 syllable is the single dash lock, unlock, and then hold, and that's the window. And again, from the outside you can't even see it. Good luck trying to find a coat hanger to get in there if you don't even know it's there. So that's about it. Let me go ahead and finish this up, grab a couple beers, and get this on YouTube.